Yesterday afternoon, I saw a missed call from my mom, and I knew that something was wrong. I called her back as quickly as I could, stepping away to privacy, and she said, "Mimi is actively dying, my grandmother." And my first thought was, before she told me, was I didn't feel her go. She can't be dead now. And then my mind processed that she was in the active phase of dying. To give you a little backstory, I've been preparing for this moment for really all of my life. When I was around 5 years old, I remember asking my Mimi, after she picked me up from school, and she had jet black straight hair, and it looked like she had an ounce of Native American blood in her. But we took one of those genealogy tests, and it turned out not to be true, even though there was Blackfoot Indian lore in our family history that was not substantiated. And she was thin, tall, and lanky, and kept herself trim and beautiful. And she was kind of an enigma even then. And just a strange duality of characteristics. But when I was 5 years old, she was my life, she was my light, she was my stand-in mother, because my own mother was taking care of some things. And as a result, I was so attached to her that I was obsessed that she was going to leave. And so I asked her, "Mimi, when are you going to die?" And she laughed and she said, not for a long time, don't worry." We were in her van, and I remember her legs and her thighs were always very cut, and she had this line running up from her knee to her hip that whenever she wore shorts, you could see the definition in her thighs. And her tan skin, which would become leathery with age, was still smooth at that time. And I remember seeing her leg and looking up at her face, and she's smiling. And I said, "But when?" And she said, "I don't know, probably not until you're out of high school." And I felt a sigh of relief, because high school seemed so far away that I knew I didn't have to worry about it for a really, really long time. And fast forward, in high school, my last year of high school, I'm living with her on her farm in East Texas, and was finishing out my last school year. Things are different between us because I'm a little more wild and rebellious, sneaking out at night and wrecking my car in the middle of the night in Mr. Adams' pasture and tearing up his fence, trying to go around a bend, driving too fast to go and see my boyfriend, who is not a great boyfriend. My decisions at that time were a little And I remember when she found out, I knew that I was going to be in deep, deep trouble. And her ice blue eyes bore into me for a week straight as she would sit in her winged back chair in the living room in steely silence, literally silence, for an entire week. Whenever you crossed a line with her, you knew it. And she was tough. She was hard as nails. But she was also the grandmother that would take all of the children and teach them how to sew and give them doll houses and create arts and crafts with puffy paint and allow us to swim in the lake. And just a wonderful, wonderful grandmother. But she came from a very hard childhood, a child of the Great Depression. And it profoundly affected her parents, and as a result, it affected her too. And she didn't tell me a lot about her childhood, but I knew it was hard, and it was hard on her. And when her mother died, my great-grandmother at 105 years old, she was there by her side and would bring her fried chicken and sugar packets, because my great-great-grandmother would hoard sugar packets because she was afraid that they were going to run out of sugar just like they did in the Great Depression. And so the top drawer of my great-great-grandmother's armoire was filled with sugar packets that she would steal and hoard. And at my great-great-grandmother's funeral, my grandmother slipped away early and didn't go to the reception because she had not allowed herself to cry in front of anybody. And this is who she was. She was strong. She was matriarchal. She maintained Thanksgiving dinners at her place for years, even beyond the time that she could lift the turkey in a pan. And even then, she would hide the fact that she was ailing and failing to meet her standards. So, at some point, I promised her that I would be there for her when she died. But the problem is that the sicker she became, the less she wanted me to see her. Because she had this pride in her. Because the way that I saw her was like that 5-year-old little girl. And she wanted me to see her that way, even in her end times. And so when she started having health problems and issues with her kidneys, she hid it from everybody, and eventually it came out in the family. And me having a biomedical background, I sat with her and I offered to go through her lab results with her to understand them, because she was scared and I could see that she was scared, and she refused. Told me, "Oh, don't worry, your uncle's taking care of it. No, I don't know where the paperwork is." And I got the sense that I was not welcome in her affairs, her medical affairs. So I began distancing myself. And when she told me that she was preparing to die, I told her it was okay. And this was years ago, almost 10 years ago. And I respected how she wanted to pass. But as it turns out, we all have changes as we get older. And I thought that she was going to die peacefully in her farm, or at her farm. She was an interior designer by trade, and she had many rooms that were decorated with this audacious, bold style that looked like something out of Home and Garden magazine. And her room was very, very comfortable and cozy. So cozy that even as a teenager, I would curl up with her in bed, in her canopy bed, and we would watch late night episodes of Cheers and Golden Girls or the news, and she would stroke my hand just like she did when I was 5 years old. And this time she would give me advice on my poor decision making, particularly as related to boyfriends. So I imagined that she would go peacefully in her room with the Bible next to her bed. But she surprised everybody around the time of the pandemic, and apparently she was suffering with dementia, and it was getting progressively worse. She was hiding it from everybody, and she stopped being able to drive and to really take care of herself. She lost a lot of weight. She kept everybody out during this time until she called my uncle and said, "Please come over and help me move," because she had sold her house and picked a facility for her to go into. This is my grandmother, classic. I don't know why people want to live for a really, really long time. Because, at a certain point, you lose the ability to take care of yourself. And you even lose the ability to go to the bathroom by yourself. And so, in our society, at least the society that I come from, perhaps the one that you come from, we have these retirement communities and nursing homes, which at the best of times is sort of like a captive resort, and at the worst of times is a prison in disguise, where you may or may not have the proper care and oversight. God forbid you have anybody abusive as your roommate or your nurse. My grandmother picked a resort type place, and she paid for it herself, which I thought was very remarkable, always wanting to make her own way. And as a result, she felt entitled to tell them to turn up or down the music or to do certain things, leveraging her power. But even though she was happy with her decision and happy with the place, and maybe my family helped, I can't remember exactly all the details because I learned it secondhand, but she paid her way and she was proud to do so. And then she kept falling, and then she kept deteriorating, and she kept going towards her demise. And at some point, I was faced with a decision to go or not to go. And I decided to respect her and not to go. And instead, I called her regularly, which I had not really done based on our relationship. It was more free-flowing, but I started regularly calling her, and I noticed that there was a marked decline in her cognition and her ability to speak. So I had already begun practicing helping to facilitate her death, but not being there in person. And this is something that I did early on in my spiritual awakening when I was in Thailand and at a full moon party, and I've told the story before, so I'll just keep this abbreviated. I was at a full moon party on a special island in Thailand, and it was around 4 o'clock. I was doing sidewalk tarot for random people that serendipitously walked up to me, had some profound moments, and I was walking back, and I saw a crowd of people, including a couple of the people that I had read tarot for, standing around this guy on the beach, and it looked like he had had an accident. So I walk up. To my surprise, 95% of the people there are taking video. This guy is unconscious, and everybody's filming it like it's entertainment. Unbelievable. And there are a couple of people that are actively helping to resuscitate him and giving him CPR. Meanwhile, his loved one and his friends were sobbing and asking him to come back. Instinctively, I knelt down and I put my hand on his arm and his shoulder, and I started talking to him, but I could tell that he couldn't hear me, and he was cold, but it was also 4 o'clock in the morning. He had been pulled out of the surf, and I wasn't sure if it was because he was dead or if it was because he was pulled out of the water and was cold. So while people are doing CPR, I tap into his energy and his conscious mind, and I begin communicating with him and asking him to come back. And he communicates with me that he doesn't want to. And I tell him it is his choice and his right. And whatever he chooses, that I support his journey. And I felt that the connection, the conduit point between us was beyond words. This was a special form of energetic communication. if you are a death doula, then you probably know, or a death facilitator, then you know what I'm talking about, presumably. I've never been trained in those. I'm assuming that you receive training about this, but you connect at this telepathic, nonverbal transmission of understanding. It's like claircognizance. That's a better way to say it. And he communicated to me that he absolutely did not want to come back. And instead, he started merging with the ocean, and he was swimming around in this layer on top of the material world like a dolphin. And so gleefully and so joyfully. And I wished him safe passage. And he dissipated into consciousness and source. And it was beautiful, and it was peaceful, and it was easy. But trying to communicate this to his sobbing wife or spouse or girlfriend didn't go over so well. I was trying to tell her that he had a very peaceful parting, and she was wrecked. I mean, she was beside herself. So I left it as it was, and I started walking back, and there was something in my energy field that was incredibly disrupted, to where it was like, because I touched him, and maybe this is why in the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying and the Tibetan yoga and sleep advice, training for how to help people pass, they say don't touch the body. Maybe this is why, I'm not sure. But there was a part of my life force that went with him, and it made me very, very ill, and I collapsed actually, and had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance, where they couldn't really figure out what was wrong, but where I was able to have fluids and vitamins and everything. I revitalized and came back. But it was very weird feeling, very, very, very strange. And so I had this experience, and I've always since then been interested in helping people pass. And in preparation for my grandmother and to keep my word with her, I have been meditating for the past 4 years, meditating and practicing projecting my consciousness into her room. Initially, I thought that it would be on her farm, and so in her bedroom. But then when she went into this retirement facility, I started practicing connecting with her there. And the reason I practice this is because with the man on the beach, I had no emotional attachment to him. So I could hold the space for him, and did hold the space for him, and wish him well on his journey and guide him to that passage point, and almost give him permission. Like, he was waiting. I could feel that he was still inside at this precipice of indecision. And so this is what I've learned. People don't like to be alone when they're dying. And being alone isn't about who is surrounding you. It's about the experience within. And this is why I feel like many of those nursing homes don't do a good job preparing us for death, because we have to be able to go within, sit with ourselves, feel out this next stage, and everything is oriented towards playing bingo, having meals, talking to your neighbors, entertainment, right? Saturday Night Live. It's just a continuation of the material life that everybody has already known. We need to prepare people for death, to accompany them through that stage, because After this practice of needing to be a clear channel, I needed to be able to be with my grandmother in meditation without grieving, because grief would hold her back. So this is why I've been practicing. So yesterday, I go into meditation and I connect with her energy. Now, I have also been practicing this as well. Whenever she was thinking about me energetically, I would try to call her. I coached her. I told her, I'm going to be there energetically. I'm going to be projecting my consciousness to you. I didn't care if she didn't understand it, because I knew that when the moment came, it would click for her. And all I wanted her to know is that it was really me. It was actually me being present with her in real time, if I could. And so yesterday, I connected with her energy, and immediately I could feel that she was scared. She was stagnant and afraid. So I walked her through the process of surrendering, of opening her heart, of telling her there was nothing to be afraid of. At first, it was like she wasn't really sure it was me, so I transmitted memories. I transmitted myself. It almost felt like she was worried it was a figment of her imagination. I reminded her that this was the moment and that everything was okay. And she had something she needed to confess. And she shared that. And I won't reveal what that was, but it was weighing on her. And I held that for her. And I told her I forgave her, and that she needed to forgive herself, because the world made her who she was. If she was born in a different time, in a different place, she wouldn't have made that decision. But where she was born and how things came to be, that was the logical decision at that time. And in the eyes of Cosmos, it just is. It's just a thing that you did. It's just a thing. So I was able to release her, and I could feel her heart start to accept. But she was waiting on my mom to get there. So I kept her company for as long as I could. And we worked through memories. There were waves of grief, her grief, my grief. I held back. The intensity of my emotions made her pull back for a moment. It was profoundly beautiful because I got to transmit some of the best memories in the way that I saw her. You know, like cursing like a sailor when she was in the company of a love interest, and being prudent and serving people with grace and social skills. You know, this dichotomy of this wild woman that had been tamed and beautiful. So I got to share all of that, and it was a loving experience. And towards the end of our meditation together, she was relaxed and she was happy. And I gave her space, and my mom arrived, and I could feel that, almost like a dam breaking. I was cooking, and the energetic line was still open, and I could feel that my grandmother was feeling remorseful isn't the right word, regretful. My grandmother was filled with regret because she didn't understand my mom for a very, very long time, until this part of her life, when she could see the spiritual power of my mom. And when you're dying, my mom is the type of person that you want around you, because not only is she spiritually attuned, she's worked in hospice, so she's comfortable with it. She's reassuring, she's kind-hearted, she's gentle. And yet at the same time, she's your advocate. So she was like, why have you not put my mom on morphine? She's struggling to breathe. Her throat is closing up. And the hospice person was like, oh, well, we're going to talk to the doctor tomorrow morning. And my mom was like, no, this is your job. She's dying. She might not make it till the morning. Can you please put her on morphine so she's comfortable? And they did. And I could also feel that my grandmother was able to communicate through intuition that she loved my mom and that she was happy that she was there and that she was regretful. And I could feel this dam breaking and this movement. So after my mom left, I continued to connect with my grandmother, and she was starting to go on. She wasn't looking for me as much. She was slipping in and out of her memories. She was departing. I could feel her more distant. And at some point I took her to the edge of this pool. And I couldn't see beyond, but it felt like this threshold where I took this gentleman who I never knew his name in Thailand. I took him to this precipice, and he willingly jumped off. He was like a dolphin. My grandmother was not. And all of a sudden I could feel this resistance, and I knew that I couldn't go beyond. So even though we had made great progress in acceptance and peace, I even could feel her gentle surrender. And finally, this hardened woman who wouldn't cry in front of anybody, who would hide the softness in her, finally she reached this place of surrender. And it was so beautiful because she was comfortable. She was comforted. She was at peace in a way that when we first started, I didn't experience with her. So I took her to as far as I could go, and I could feel that resistance. I was in and out of meditation, texting my mom the whole time. And finally I told my mom, she's at this pool. I got to give her space because something's going on. Like she's coming back online. She had almost completely gone, and then she started coming back. And my mom said, this pool, I've seen it before in a dream. And she started describing it to me. And she said, I'm going to go in and I'm going to help her. And I'll be damned if my mom didn't go and take her into the water and help her pass beyond where I could go. It was like this complementary skill set that I didn't even know we had. And my mom started texting me. She's afraid because she never learned how to swim. And so now I'm taking her on the next part of the journey. And all of a sudden, even right before I got that text, I checked in on my grandmother and I couldn't feel her. It was like she was gone, but not gone. All I felt was this watery fluid that it was a barrier. And I knew that she was there somewhere, but the pinging person that I was communicating with, I couldn't access anymore. And when I looked too hard, it would pulse, almost like this phone call. It would pulse this energy and bring her back. So I started letting go, and I started working on letting go. My mother helped her into the water and eventually pass peacefully. And she passed this morning. And before I found out that she passed, I could feel her energy of departure. And I could feel that she was at rest, that she was free, and that she was happy. She had gently surrendered into death.